don't post here. Or anywhere, really. My occupation didn't leave me much time for browsing the internet. But, after my last job, I needed a break. My boss, Harry, insisted on it, actually. So, I've had time for surfing the web lately. I Google things a lot now. And not that anything you find is a reliable source of information, but better than nothing. Mostly I'm trying to find answers. I didn't really know where to start, Torn up shirts, doll heads, big-ass spider things. Nothing really came up. But then I found it. I found the bastard. And given the shit I've just been reading about, and the fact that you kids seem more familiar with the thing than anyone else, I decided to record this. I am a bail bonds officer in Kansas City, Missouri. A bounty hunter, and I was tracking a man, Denny Bucknell. I was supposed to earn 20% off this simple little rundown, and let me tell you, I was excited. This time, he was worth it. I'd cash in one of the biggest checks of my entire career. You see, Bucknell was usually arrested on drunk and disorderly charges. A colleague of mine had chased him down 3 or 4 times before, when he failed to show up to court. So, I knew he'd be an easy paycheck. Bucknell was usually passed out drunk somewhere and had slept through his sentencing. My colleague would find him, sober him up, and drag him to the courthouse, collecting an easy $200 for half an hour's work. That's what a man like Denny Bucknell used to be worth. Harry, my boss, would post $1,000 bail. Denny would enjoy a few nights of freedom to continue drinking or whatever it was he did. And then we, the bonds officers, would get $200 in our pocket while the douche did some community service. That's how it used to be. That's how things used to go. But not this time. This time, if I lost him, I lost my chance at 20% of a $50,000 bail. $10,000 to bring in the drunkard. He was a loser, a half-wit. It should have been an easy gig, but fear does strange things to people. I know that. I know that real well at this point. To be honest, I didn't think he'd actually leave the city. Most fugitives like him don't. This time, Bucknell did, though. I had to chase him down, and what I found when I caught him... Jesus. The whole thing was different, right from the very beginning. First, he disappeared right after the preliminary hearing. Didn't even say thank you to Harry for posting bail. Just poof. The regulars at the bars he frequented said he hadn't been there for days. His friends, if they really could be called that, said he spent a lot of time at this pawn shop down on Truman Road. Apparently, that's where Bucknell bought himself 2 old pistols, a revolver and a semi, along with a 20-gauge shotgun and this rusty machete-looking thing. Granted, we didn't know all this until later, until after I found him. I don't know why Harry always fronted him the money, especially given these circumstances. Harry normally paid his bail because Bucknell's wife and Harry were old friends from grade school, and I don't know, Bucknell's old lady didn't like being home alone with the kids, blah blah, whatever. She was cashing in a favor from an old friend, and Harry knew it. Besides, Denny Bucknell was a drunk, but not a bad guy, so let him stagger home to his family. But after what happened this time, his wife and 2 kids, 12 and 8 years old, had gone missing. There were a few spots of blood at the scene. Nothing too awful, just little in the carpet and in the kitchen. But forensics matched it to his wife, who was missing. It was enough for the police to bring him in for questioning. There was nothing from the children. No blood, no prints, no sign of a struggle. Nothing. Bucknell himself was found locked in a closet, clinging onto a baseball bat and just shaking. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, like he'd been staring for hours and unblinking. When the cops opened the closet door, Bucknell screamed and took off. I don't mean... He didn't swing the bat or anything. He just went right for the door. He tried to run. He didn't make it very far before they tackled him. I reviewed the basics of the report. I don't normally care how it happened or who was hurt or why it went down. I just want to know how to catch the fugitive. This time, however, I was interested. I wanted to know why the judge set his bail so high. So, Harry got some information from the detectives, including a bit from his interrogation tapes. Harry and I watched it. Bucknell didn't say anything. During interrogations, he just looked around, his shoulders slumped, his arms drawn in close to his chest, and his eyes were darting around the room, looking at every shadow. After a while of this, he started muttering, said that he wanted to be let go. Then he demanded to be let go, insisted that he wasn't safe. Denny Bucknell said one thing that got him into more trouble than anything else. He said, "I tried, but I couldn't hide her in time. I didn't want to. It's all my fault." So the detective got in his face and Bucknell flipped out. Denny Bucknell screamed. Not an angry scream. Not like he was trying to intimidate the detective or anything. No. Denny was fucking terrified. The tone of his voice, that pitch that he went to, how long he held it, the shape of his mouth, how his hands shook, and that look in his eyes. I didn't like to think about it then, and I sure as hell don't now. We turned it off. The judge wasn't going to allow bail, given that Bucknell was a flight risk after all. Something happened during that preliminary hearing. I don't know what it was, but Harry said that 2 suits walked in, all sunglasses and earpieces, and they just stood in the back. Harry noticed, but no one else really seemed to. He said they didn't say anything, they just stood there. And the judge, he changed his entire demeanor after that. He looked grumpy and spooked all at once. From that point on, after seeing the 2 feds, the judge went easy on Bucknell. He was released on $50,000 bail. No one said anything for a while. Then Harry said he'd front the money. When I heard, my teeth nearly fell out of my skull. Who exactly was going to pay that back? Bucknell would be going away to prison, and I hate to say it, it's not like his wife could pay that back. Even if she wasn't missing, they didn't have that kind of money, and really, Denny Bucknell wasn't worth that much. Harry should have just let him sit in jail until his court date. His court date came and went, and as we expected, no Denny Bucknell. So I immediately took the case and began canvassing the town. After I spent about 6 hours of hitting his usual haunts and running down a list of known associates, I heard what I needed to hear. A couple of people all confirmed that he was heading out of town. Harry called with a report that someone matching Bucknell's description had jacked a car with a shotgun. Bucknell carjacking, really. But I started to take this more seriously. I called in a favor from a friend of mine and found out where his car was seen. At a Phillips 66 gas station right near Antioch Road. There was a few miles north of Kansas City, right off I-35, and he was leaving town all right. $10,000. That was my reward for bringing him in. So, it was worth a bit of a drive. I had to move fast, though. And besides the usual state-appointed time constraints on pursuing a bounty, I-35 was a straight shot north to Iowa. And if he hopped states to Kansas, no big deal. It's right across the river. I track fugitives there all the time. They know me there. But north to Iowa, it would make my job much, much more difficult. So, when a fugitive crosses state lines, the marshals tend to get involved, and it's a race to apprehend him. I hate to say it, but they usually win. So the idea was to nab him before he crossed over to Iowa. I drove north as fast as I could. I had my 10mm Colt holstered under my left armpit, and a small Smith & Wesson CS9 on my ankle. Handcuffs, pepper spray, mini mag light, and a Taser X26 pistol on my belt. $10,000. The sun was setting and night was coming fast, and I had to find him. I had to. He made it past Kearney and Haynesville. He was almost at Cameron when I caught up to the car he'd stolen. I almost didn't see it in the dark. It was up in the grass on the side of the highway, well past the shoulder of the road. It just rolled gently there next to the trees at the side. When I got out of my vehicle and approached Bucknell's car, I drew my taser, despite the urge to pull out my Colt. I crept around to the driver's side window, making sure to keep a safe distance, and be ready in case he pulled that shotgun he'd used in the carjacking. So I swept the beam of my flashlight into the driver's side window, and Denny Bucknell wasn't inside. The airbags were deployed, and the passenger door was open. There was blood on the seat cushions, and he was gone. I started to see the front of the car as I passed around. The front bumper and the hood were fine, but the windshield was just trashed. It looked like several objects had flown through the glass. At first I didn't know what it was. I still don't. I thought maybe a shotgun had gone off and the holes were from the buckshot. But I've seen that before. I know how it would have looked. This, though, the way the windshield bent and buckled inward, the way the seats were all peppered with glass, something definitely went from the outside in. The holes, maybe 6 or 7 of them, were all the same size. A little smaller than a baseball, I guess. Nothing inside the car, though. No rocks. Nothing. So, what the hell did that to his car? What did he hit? It was as if something, half a dozen things, pointy, all the same diameter, had impaled the windshield. Like a tree branch, maybe, but there's nothing sticking out of the glass. Nothing there. An orange flash lit up in the woods, and half a second later I heard a gunshot ring in my ears. I clipped my taser to the belt and drew the Colt from under my armpit. I remember thinking, he better not have killed himself. He's no good to me dead. I can't get my 20% if he's in pieces. He better not have blown his head off. That's what I thought. In hindsight, he probably should have. I entered the woods in a hurry. The first of the thin trees passed by me in a blur. More shots were ringing out. I quickened my pace. I clicked off my mag light as soon as I got closer. You know, I didn't want to give myself away and give him a target to shoot at. So I stood there in the dark. There he was, shooting his pistol limply into the trees with his left hand, and dragging the barrel of the shotgun through the pine needles with his right hand. He was just kind of spinning around in circles, babbling. Bucknell was whimpering and murmuring to himself hysterically. I took cover behind one of the tall, thin trees, just flinching at every shot of his pistol. He'd gone mad. Denny Bucknell was insane. I thought, how could I get close enough to zap him without getting shot? The X-26 had a range of maybe 15 feet. It wasn't as if I could shoot it twice, you know. Could I get close enough to him without him hearing? With my boots in the leaves and the twigs and the pine needles underfoot. So, I don't know why, but I decided to call out to him. Maybe I could talk some sense into him, you know? Denny, I said. I didn't know what else to say. I tried to level with him, you know, see if I could calm him down. Denny, what are you doing out here, man? And he said, Who's there? Who is that? So I say, Harry sent me to come find you, Denny. I was calm, but firm, you know. That's how it worked for me in the past. It would be certain and absolute, but not threatening, you know. And don't lie to them. They can tell if you're lying. So I say, I'm not here to hurt you, okay? I'm just going to... And then he just started going off on me. You stupid son of a bitch. Run. Get the fuck out of here. He just started screaming at me. Yeah, I tried to explain, but he wouldn't let me continue. He was screaming, yelling, shouting at me. He was using every ounce of his energy until his voice gave out and his lungs just ran out of air. And then there was gasping, frantic breath. He'd suck in air and then he'd start yelling all over again. He's out here. He's out here. He's fucking found me. And then Denny's babbling came to an abrupt stop. The silence was eerie. I didn't know what it meant. As hard as he'd been screaming, did he have a stroke or something? An aneurysm? So I chanced a peek around the tree. I'm gonna pause here for a moment, just to make sure I record this right. I think it's important to describe what I saw as best I can. It doesn't really make sense, but I think you guys will understand. That is why I'm posting this here, after all. In Denny's flashlight, I could just barely see a man standing in the trees behind Denny. Denny had seen him too. I guess that's why he shut up so quick. He was tall and thin and pale. Really, really tall. 7, 8 feet, maybe? I mean, I'm 5'11", and he was... I don't know, he was very tall. He wore a suit and tie. That's all I saw the first time I looked. And it pierced the silence. Denny's scream. It was the same scream from earlier in the interrogation tape. The tone, that pitch that it went to. It was the terrible sound of a man just feeling pure, awful fear. Just a tone of hopelessness. And then it went away. Not like Denny stopped screaming or anything. It's like... Have you ever heard a siren go by? on an ambulance, maybe. Or someone playing music in their car, the windows down and they're speeding by real fast. How the sound just kind of goes away, like it's getting softer and softer, lower in pitch. That's what his scream did. It went away. Denny got pulled away somewhere. I know that because when I rounded the side of that tree and I flicked my flashlight on, he was gone. His pistol was still falling to the ground, and his shotgun tipped down into the pine needles. Just gone. It's like something had snatched him. Denny got pulled away into the trees, into the darkness between the trees, into the shadowy spots that my flashlight couldn't reach. So I froze. I didn't know what to do. What would you have done? I freaked out. I wasn't even thinking about the 20%. I was trying to remember how to breathe. The back of my neck tingled and my gut felt like it was falling down into my legs. All of me went hot and cold at the same time. I did what anyone would do. I turned to run. I turned around to run, at least. I didn't run. I couldn't. The thing was there, right behind me. I didn't even hear it move. I looked up at its face, at where its face should have been. It didn't have one. Chalky white, no eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just a thin, bald head. No face. It had a white shirt and a black tie and the blackest suit. There were terrible white hands hanging limply at the ends of the thin black arms. But it didn't move, it didn't speak, it didn't do anything. I took it all in, just frozen, for just 2 seconds. 2 seconds that took forever before my brain clicked back in. And I remembered the Colt. It was heavy in my hand, and the weight comforted me. I lifted the pistol and fired vaguely at its chest. Nothing. I couldn't have missed. It wasn't even 5 feet from me. It passed right through the thing. Before I could squeeze off a second shot, the thing moved. It wasn't its arms. Something came from behind him. It was long and spidery and thin, and it was as black as its suit. Whatever it was, a tentacle or an insect leg or whatever, it whipped around over its head from behind its back and smacked the pistol from my hand. It stung like being stabbed in the wrist with an icicle. I stumbled backward and fell into the crunchy leaves. I dropped my flashlight. It lit up the floor of the woods, but nothing else. It was just the light brown dirt and the tree roots and the dead leaves. But I could see the legs of that black thing, thin and long, shiny leather shoes. It took a strange step toward me, and I saw wriggling behind it like a dozen terrible black tails thrashing and twisting and curling. The tall man opened itself. And I don't know why I did what I did. I had another pistol on my ankle, the Smith & Wesson. I could have reached for that. But instead I pulled my taser from my belt. I had only one shot. I had one shot before it took me away, and I knew I couldn't miss. Without seeing anything to aim at, I just pointed vaguely ahead of me, and I pulled the trigger. I don't really remember what happened. It didn't make a noise. I don't think the bolts struck it. There was no pulsing, no zapping sound. I know that much. The only sound I heard was a soft plop in the leaves. A couple of plops, actually. I caught my breath and I looked around, and it wasn't in front of me anymore. I could still feel its presence. It felt hateful and furious. I scrambled to my feet, and I pulled the small Smith & Wesson from my ankle holster. With rubbery knees, I went quickly to collect my flashlight, and I spun 360, scanning the trees for the thing. But I didn't see anything. I caught my breath, and I shook my head. Had I imagined it? Did I really see that? The woods were quiet, you know. I dropped to my knees and sighed. After a moment, I swept the beam of the flashlight to search for my Colt. My hand still tingled from where I was struck, you know. I could still feel that. I couldn't have imagined that, right? While I was looking around for it, I thought I saw something, just briefly out of the corner of my eye. When I focused the light on it, there was nothing there, but I swear I saw something black, like a giant shadow crawling away into the trees, on legs like a spider or a long centipede, maybe. I shuddered and shook the thought from my head, and, well, before I found the pistol, I saw something else at my feet. The sight of it made me tremble then, and it still does now, even just to think back on it. There, on the forest floor, on the bed of dead leaves and pine needles, was the thing's head. Blank and faceless and devoid of emotion. That pale white head came down to just a cleanly cut neck. In the bottom of the neck was a hole, and I could see that the thing was hollow. It was a big porcelain head, like a doll's head. The hands were there too, porcelain ceramic hands. There was a torn piece of a man's white dress shirt, just the collar and the front of the shirt down to maybe third or fourth button. And around the collar, there was a black tie looped around. There were an empty pair of black shiny shoes. I didn't understand what I'd found. I couldn't think. I'd lost Denny, and I didn't get my 20%. Officially, Denny Bucknell is still missing. I've had more than a few visits from various police forces. Kansas City Police Department, Missouri State Police, even the U.S. Marshals dropped by to hear my story once. I didn't connect the dots until after the suits showed up. Man, the feds gave me a fucking heart attack. Opened the door to see two men in black suits and white shirt, black tie, standing at my door. They asked me about my experience in the woods, and I told them. They were the only ones that didn't scoff at me. But then again, they didn't really register any recognizable emotion to begin with, so they thanked me for my time, and they left. It's when I remembered Harry telling me about the two feds that were at Bucknell's preliminary hearing, the ones that scared the judge. I think someone out there knew what took Denny Bucknell's wife and kids. I think they knew that it would come for him, too. That's why they made the judge let Denny go. I don't know why they wanted it that way. Maybe they wanted to catch the thing in the act. Maybe they just wanted Denny to get taken. I don't know. Maybe I screwed up by telling them the truth, and they'll be watching me now, waiting for what you kids call the Slender Man to find me. That's the one bit that I don't like, though. The head, those hands and the shoes, that shirt and tie. I think that it was wearing them, using them like props, like a costume. You notice there was no suit coat, no pants on the forest floor. That darkness, the awful darkness that came out of it, out of its back, those legs or arms or tentacles that reached out from its back, it was the same shade of darkness as the suit. Just pure shadow, as black as it gets. This thing, I don't think it really has a head. It's just pure shadow. Fear incarnate. It's just pretending, trying to fit in and move amongst us unnoticed. How often do you walk through a crowded street and see every single person's face? You know, can you take all of that in? Can you say for certain, without a doubt, that you've never walked past someone who didn't have a face? Me, I'm trained to see every little detail, to pick out faces in a crowd, and even I can't really say for sure. So maybe this thing's been hiding in plain sight. I am certain that it'll come for me someday. And probably soon. I'll be ready, though. I'm not running. Not like Denny did. Me, I can sit here and wait this thing out. The bit that I don't like is this. Without that head, without that shirt and tie, when this Slender Man thing isn't masquerading as one of us, how can you see it? How can you tell it apart from every other shadow you see? In a dark room, he's everywhere.